from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Hello there. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan. Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. Long time. I think my uncle knows him. He said he was dead. Oh, he's not dead. Only on the inside. You know him. Well, of course I know him. He's me. Welcome to A Certain Point of View, where remember, whatever I tell you is true from a certain point of view. I love Star Wars. I'm not just going to work dressed like this because I don't work for the Empire, but nothing makes me hornier than seeing a fleet of Star Destroyers come out of hyperspace. Triangles might be my kink, but when they are filled with stormtroopers and imperial garrisons, only imperial stormtroopers can make Troy that horny. I absolutely love Star Wars. Ever since I was a kid, it was something my dad shared with me that was very special to him, and then it became special to me because that was the first thing that I ever did to sort of break through to the guy. And as someone with daddy issues, Star Wars is sort of the perfect opera mixture for an allegory and to watch it and be like, you know what, man, I'm gonna call my father. I'm gonna forgive him for all the trauma he did to me. Yeah, he cut off my hand, but if I don't forgive him now, I'm gonna have another robot hand and have to work with this wrinkly dude that looked like a scrotum. My love for Star Wars is number one, and it has been my whole life. I can't think of a time in my life where 24/7 it wasn't permeating all my thoughts. And the only thing I love more than Star Wars is sharing Star Wars with other people, getting to talk about it with other people, creating a community of people who could talk about the things they love about it. That's the problem. Is there's so much money to be made off of hate. Your hate has made you powerful. Now, will you bomb the Acolyte and take your incel's place at my side? If you will not hate the Acolyte, you will be a shill. There's so much hate out there for the fanboys, and it's nothing new. It started with the first Star Wars movie I ever saw, which was Phantom Menace in '99, and George Lucas wrote and directed all three of those. He didn't write and direct all three of the original trilogy. He wrote and directed A New Hope because at the time, this was in the era of filmmaking where the golden era, after the golden era, like the young guys were taking the reins now because movies were a very new thing. 40 years, I'd say they've been around, and you had all these executives running it, and now you had these guys running studios, and they were just trying to make movies that made money, and a lot of the time it was just the same movie over and over again. And George Lucas was friends with Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and Spielberg. Imagine those are your homies, those are your dogs, and they're all directors. And George Lucas did a movie in the '60s with Ron Howard and Harrison Ford called American Graffiti, and 20th Century Fox wanted George Lucas to essentially make another American Graffiti, and he was like, nah, I got this idea for a movie that's like Flash Gordon, but also the Bible. And they were like, we really just want you to make another American Graffiti. And he was like, okay, well then bankroll Star Wars, bitch. And that's how the first one got made, and no one believed in it. Not even George Lucas. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg went to Hawaii when Star Wars premiered. It wasn't called A New Hope when it first premiered. It was called Star Wars. But when that came out, they went to Hawaii on vacation because they thought it was going to flop. And there they created what became Raiders of the Lost Ark. So again, it's just about who you work with, because even Harrison Ford got the part of Han Solo because when he was an actor up and coming, I'm guessing he started coming up in the late 50s, but definitely worked in the 60s, and you would get these things called development deals, and you would sign with a studio and they would put you, it's guaranteed you work, boom, 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 these 3 jobs, for example. And after those 3 jobs, he didn't work and didn't want to take any shitty acting jobs that were going to ruin his image. So he started his own carpentry business. And when they were doing the readings and for the line readings and auditions for Star Wars, Harrison Ford was setting up a door in the office that they were doing it in. And George Lucas was there with him, and he would read for Han Solo. And dozens of actors auditioned for him. Kurt Russell, I think Billy Dee even auditioned for Han. And George Lucas was just like, "Yeah, you're Han Solo, man." Like that was probably the worst day of Harrison Ford's life. Although he's known for being grumpy, but I think he sort of plays it up because if you watch him in interviews back in the 70s talking about the making of the movie, when they're making it, he's very excited about like. I've never seen. He said, the Wookiee in the movie. He's they don't mention it, but he's 200, and he has like half a smile, which he never does. But now, when you see him in interviews, they're like, "Do you think Han Solo's a Force ghost?" And he's like, "George Lucas should hang himself." But I think he's playing it up. It's all about images. Just you gotta be the tough guy all the time, because it's either that or Mark Hamill, who is universally loved right now online. But the first George Lucas. Here are a bunch of reasons what make him great. George is a visionary. You have to understand that about George. And this is why the prequels are the way they are versus why the original trilogy is the way that it is. George Lucas is a visionary. Someone I heard once said he's a good director. He's not a great director. I don't know. I've never been in a movie shot by George Lucas. I've just read a lot of books, and I've read a lot. Carrie Fisher in Princess Diarist said George was known for giving one bit of direction, and that was faster, more intense. And when you're saying things that you could write but have never been said out loud, and it's the 70s, it's very frustrating to understand what world you're living in, and everyone sort of had to create it on their own. And they all did. Literally, Carrie Fisher, in the first scene she has in A New Hope with Peter Cushing, she just does a British accent. Why? Was that in the script? No. So was Princess Leia not wearing underwear, because according to George Lucas, there's no underwear in space and there's fire whenever he feels like it. But she started speaking with a British accent because he started speaking, because he had a British accent. And she does not have a British accent the rest of the movies. Padme has one in The Phantom Menace when she's Queen Amidala, but that's sort of like a, Padme doing this voice. She's doing it because she had a body double. Dorme was in Attack of the Clones. I forget what the one in Phantom Menace is, but it was the one Keira Knightley played. And I think they had the accent just so it gave him a baseline because they had to hide in plain sight and constantly trade off. But back to George Lucas, when he was making the deal for Star Wars, they gave him all the merchandising rights because they didn't think anybody was going to buy any toys to this, because again, it's the 70s, and the closest thing to being that commercial at the time in a science fiction sphere was Star Trek, and it hardly lasted, and it was still very fringe. And Planet of the Apes, but Planet of the Apes was a franchise that had been run into the ground by this point. I think Battle for the Planet of the Apes came out in 1975, which was probably around the time production for Star Wars started, but George Lucas wrote it over several years. It was initially called The Journal of the Whills, Part 1, The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, I believe. And he narrowed it down to Star Wars. And when 20th Century Fox wanted another American Graffiti from him, and he just wouldn't budge because he was so hell-bent on Star Wars, they finally said, "Fuck it, George. Well, do your goddamn Star Wars movie. Here's the money. You can have the merchandising rights. You could have whatever rights you want over the sequels. This isn't going anywhere. Just flop and let this dream die so you can come back and make the movies that us guys in suits who don't have a creative bone in their body want you to make." I mean, there was pros and cons. George was just a business-minded guy as much as he was a visionary, right? Like he bought Carrie Fisher's likeness for $10,000 in the 70s, so she never earned any money off of the merchandising rights, which is why she sort of died the way she did and had her relapse, because you can't buy drugs if you can't afford them. And Disney money check clears, cha-ching, boom, immediately gone. And you could blame that on her parents because her parents told her to sell the merchandising rights. Debbie Reynolds told her to sell the merch rights because they said this movie's not going anywhere. You're not gonna make the 10 grand while you can. They made Carrie Fisher go to a fat farm for that movie, and then when they decided that didn't work, they decided to give her that iconic bun hairstyle because for some reason, if your hair is smushed in between two sides of your face, you're not fat anymore. And also, she wasn't. She was a perfect woman, and if she was fat, so the fuck what? The woman at the end of the one of Jabba's dancers in Return of the Jedi is credited as Fat Woman. That was okay, George. You didn't even give her a name. Every character in Star Wars has a page on Wikipedia. It's called Glup Shido, where every time a new Star Wars trailer drops, Star Wars fans be like, "Oh my God, Glup Shido is back." Every character has a backstory. Max Rebo, Panda Bonda, any of the Pantorans, the clones all have different names. But the dancer at the end of Return of the Jedi is credited as Fat Woman because Star Wars just loves them. And it was your mother, by the way, which is the craziest thing. The only actor to really have a career in front of the camera again was Carrie Fisher. I'm sorry, Mark Hamill. No, those were the two who did not have a career. Harrison Ford. Mark Hamill had a car accident around the time the first Star Wars came out, and his face really went through it. And it might have been they may have been filming some parts of Empire Strikes Back by then. But that's why they added in that scene with the Wampa attacking him over the face to just explain why his face didn't look as pretty as it did before. And he was such a great actor. I mean, The Last Jedi, he stole the whole show, but he only got horror movie roles after playing Luke Skywalker for not that long, 77 to 83, because that's how long the space between movies used to be. And then it was like, I didn't go to film school to just only be in horror movies. I guess I'm done. And then got offered the part of the Joker, and just two of my favorite characters of all time embodied in one man. The originals, after A New Hope came out, I believe George decided to leave the Directors Guild, or he was kicked out because he didn't want to put opening credits in the crawl. He just wanted it to say, long time ago in a galaxy, far, far away. Then Star Wars, then it is a period of civil war in the galaxy. And they wouldn't put opening credits in. I believe they fined him, and he said, all right, I'm out. So he couldn't direct 5 and 6. So who did he get for Empire Strikes Back? My favorite movie, he got his directing teacher from school, Irving Kershner, and George still wrote the movies. He was still, just because he didn't direct it doesn't mean he wasn't at all involved. He was still very much involved in all of it. It's just more or less, here's the vision, and he gives it to the guy who can pull the balloon back down a little bit more. And then the third one, he really wanted David Lynch to direct, and there's a really funny video online of David Lynch going, George Lucas asked me to direct a Star Wars, and I got to his house and saw something called a Wookiee. Then my headache grew to about this size.
I called my lawyer and told him that I wasn't going to do it, and he said, you just lost, I don't know how many millions of dollars.
And Return of the Jedi was directed by, I think Lawrence Kasdan wrote it with George Lucas, and Empire as well. And his son, whatever Kasdan, wrote Solo, I believe. But he had help, right? Like it's not that he needed it, but he needed it. You need a second set of eyes on things sometimes, especially if it's a passion project where you're literally building an entire world and creating things that have never existed or have been thought of before. And the official Lucas Star Wars after 83 was sort of done, you know, until 91, I want to say. It might have been 89. The official reset and Star Wars is back came with Heir to the Empire. That trilogy. If you have not read those, that's where Thrawn first makes his appearance. Grand Admiral Thrawn, what was once a terrifying nightmare, has now become a reality for those who may oppose us. Though, if you haven't read those books, I suggest to do the audiobook because they could be very dense. And that's when cloning was a big thing. Every Star Wars character has an evil clone. There's Luke Skywalker with 2 U's. Luke in those. Read the books, and then we'll talk about Mara Jade and everyone else next week. We'll talk about some sequel stuff. I'm just sort of blanketing this pod because there's a bunch of subjects I want to talk about, and sometimes once I just start, I can't stop. And if you look around, there's nobody here to stop me. Yoda will always be with you, but your listeners, they may not. I hear a new podcast you have. You have the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Listen to the audiobooks. Because sci-fi books could just be a lot to read sometimes, and sometimes I'll be reading and thinking, oh, I exactly know what they're talking about, and then I go online and I'm like, wow, I completely misread that book. The Bloodline book was a very, very good book. That's a book about Leia running the Senate. Mon Mothma's getting sick, and Leia's basically running for president, and then her secret gets outed that she's Darth Vader's daughter, because nobody knew she was Darth Vader's daughter other than Luke and Bail Organa. Bail recorded a message for her that he was going to give to her, but he died on Alderaan, obviously, and inside job, and a senator named Ransom Casterfo got a hold of it when Leia was running, and that was her big outed secret. And then she decided to walk away from politics and formed the Resistance because she was the only one who saw that there was a possible coming threat of the First Order, and nobody else would take it seriously. And nobody took it seriously. Everyone who didn't take it seriously blew up on Hosnian Prime and Force Awakens. So that's what the fuck happens. Sorry, bitches. You should have listened to the woman who helped blow up. She didn't help blow up the Death Star. She just sat there and watched Luke do it. She did break out of the prison by herself. What did she do in Return of the Jedi? She got shot and had a coke nail and shot back at the motherfuckers who shot her. Got her revenge on Han Solo and rescued Han Solo. What was the plan in Return of the Jedi? Someone said the Return of the Jedi is like when all of your friends decide on doing something, but nobody tells the other one. Like, let's look at Return of the Jedi, the opening. Luke sends R2 and 3PO to Jabba's palace and offers them as a gift to Jabba in exchange for Han Solo's life. First of all, how was he going to get the carbonite back if he just accepted the gifts? Was he going to send a message on Force time? I don't know. Then, when that doesn't work, Leia shows up with Chewbacca. He has to be put in chains again, and he's like, which means they had us in chains for 400 years. I can't believe this is happening again. Then Leia gets caught, put in a metal bikini. Don't know if they ever rinsed it off. Then Luke shows up. Luke was probably the most reckless of them all, which is what Yoda warned him of in Empire Strikes Back. You are reckless. So was I, if you remember. But never show up to a gangster's house with no weapon, did you? Then, Luke wanted that to happen. The exact outcome of what happened when Luke showed up is what he wanted, because he wanted to show and prove to himself that he was a badass Jedi. Jedi Knight, I'm out of it for a little while. Everyone's got delusions of grandeur. I know, pal, I know. It's a cult. Then he sort of gets humbled in Return of the Jedi, and Return of the Jedi is a very interesting segue into what's going on in the Star Wars discourse, because for the same reason I started Secret Identity, I wanted to start this one, because there's a lot of people just talking about what they hate. I'm like, why can't you talk about what you loved about something? So many people would have enjoyed the Darth Plagueis cameo in The Acolyte if they didn't make their minds up that they hated the show and just give it a chance. When Return of the Jedi came out, it was controversial. Sometimes when I'm I've had maybe one or two more edibles than I should have, and I'm watching it. I'm like, yo, this movie is crazy for coming out when it did in the 80s, because it really it's a rough ending. Not as rough as Rise of Skywalker, which it was like a ice cream sundae. You're watching it and you're like, yeah. Oh, this made me sick. Why did I do this to myself? Return of the Jedi was a little controversial when it came out, and people are loving to hate the Acolyte right now the same way they love to hate the Phantom Menace in the 90s and the rest of the prequels. Until now, you have become the very thing you swore to destroy. Don't lecture me, Troy B1, Obi-Bond. I do not fear the women as you do. I have brought fear, anger, incels, and insecurity to my new YouTube comments. It's the hate for it now, and Disney Star Wars, which I'll admit, I don't love everything that's out about it, but that's the point. I remember when Force Awakens and Rogue One were out. That was a great time to be a Disney Star Wars fan, because there was these new comics coming out. The canon had been reset. There was these movies coming out. We knew we had two more movies in the sequel trilogy, and Force Awakens ended on such a great cliffhanger. And then Last Jedi came out and just split the fandom in two. And I don't think Star Wars ever recovered from that. And listen, I didn't love The Last Jedi. I almost walked out of the theater. It broke my heart. It's the best out of the three sequels, which is, as Jay Leno would say, thanks being the smartest Kardashian. But every time I watch it, I'm like, okay, it is a great movie about failure. There's that scene between Luke and Yoda where he goes, failure most of all. The greatest teacher failure is, we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters. I was talking to Will Diamond about that. Shout out my man Will of the Force. And he said, great lesson, which I just wish Luke wasn't the one who had to learn it. Couldn't agree more. The Disney Solo was great and was a casualty of The Last Jedi hate, because so many people wanted to just prove a point by, well, you're not going to get my money. Cool. Don't worry about it, dude. George Lucas be the first one to tell you it is for 12-year-olds. You can enjoy it as you get older, because there's a kid inside of everybody. And it's always nice to take a bite out of a member berry, but it ain't for you. The most beautiful thing about Disney Star Wars, two things. One, Disney Star Wars would have faded into obscurity had Disney not bought it. I'm not saying that it wasn't popular and that there wasn't a lot of content coming out. Force Unleashed came out 4 years after Revenge of the Sith, and I think it was like the top-selling Star Wars game of all time, and it wasn't sandwiched in between anything. We would have definitely gotten games like 1313, but it would have faded. And you got to take the good with the bad, and just because you didn't like it doesn't mean it was bad. And it is for that next generation. When I went to go see The Force Awakens and there was a father sitting next to his kid, that was what I remember more than seeing the movie. And I love that movie. I saw that movie every day in theaters for 2 weeks when it came out, because of the excitement and hype around it. And I hadn't had any, I'd waited for episode 7 my whole life. And I was just happy that there would be new Star Wars. And I remember Force Friday when they had all the new toys coming up. I lined up outside Toys R Us in Times Square in the middle of the summer just to get a Kylo Ren action figure. And the hype and excitement around it was beautiful, and then it died off. And now everyone who dislikes a Disney Star Wars project, if you disagree with them, you're a shill. You can't have any nuance. There's things I liked about The Acolyte. There's things I didn't like about The Acolyte. There's things I don't like about the original trilogy. For example, Obi-Wan and Yoda's grand plan was to hide out for 20 years until Luke was of age to kill his father, who they were never planning on telling was his dad. Watch the scene in Return of the Jedi. You don't blame me. Obi-Wan gets all pissy at Luke when he goes, "You must face Darth Vader again." I can't do it, Ben. I can't kill my own father. Well, then the Emperor has already won. Guess I'll call Spider-Man and tell him that a certain little boy can't kill his own father. I was really surprised at the Acolyte hate because when Disney first bought Star Wars, we were sort of waterboarded with original trilogy content because they thought that everyone just hated the prequels. But when really it was adults who took their kids to see it and couldn't sit through another second of Jar Jar Binks, which, fair. I love Jar Jar. You'll never hear a word of Jar Jar slander from me. But as a result of that, we only got original trilogy content. 2015 Star Wars Battlefront was only 4, 5, and 6. The Rebels show, which was incredible, but again, I have always wanted a show that took place between 3 and 4, and I'm glad they finally told that story. Now they've told it twice. They told it in Rebels, and they told it in Bad Batch, which I still haven't finished. It took them a minute to realize, and by they I mean Disney, that the kids who grew up watching the prequel movies are now adults. And adults have money, and they love to spend it on stuff that makes them forget about their lives. And if that thing is Space Wizards with daddy issues, sign me up. So when The Acolyte came out, I thought this is going to be great prequel lore, and it's going to take place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, which now, 25 years later, everyone loves. That was not the reaction when it came out. There's 5-hour dissection videos of The Phantom Menace, which is longer than the goddamn movie. There's something unusually strange about this boy. Went to go see it in theaters, and when it came out May the 4th, everyone's laughing. It's a nostalgia movie, you know, the same way I imagine Empire and A New Hope. And I mean, whenever my dad tells me about going to see A New Hope, he tells me about going to see it with his father, which is what my memories are of seeing Star Wars. And that's who these are for, and that's who these new audiences are for. And it's really cool that they're putting the prequels back out in theaters, because you could relive those moments as an adult and sit back and go, oh man, this is what it was like to see that back then. And that's also when chat rooms were invented. So it was really easy to just get in a bubble of Jar Jar, Watto, Boss Nass hate. And I thought The Acolyte, like many of us did, was going to revolve around Darth Plagueis. You're going, who's Darth Plagueis? If you're listening to this, you probably know who Darth Plagueis is. But maybe you're a new Star Wars fan and you don't know. Recommendation 1 for the week is Darth Plagueis by James Lucchino. I'm rereading it right now. I'm doing the audiobook right now. I read the book in preparation for The Acolyte. The audiobook is even better. Darth Plagueis we weren't sure if Palpatine telling Anakin the tragedy of Darth Plagueis in Revenge of the Sith was just bullshit in his way of getting Anakin closer to the dark and grooming him, or if he was real. The Darth Plagueis novel basically is the origin story it's Palpatine's origin story. The 2/3 of it, the first quarter of it, is the relationship with him and his master, Darth Tenebrous, who he kills. And Tenebrous was very science focused. And the thing about the Force, the original concept for the Clone Wars was Jedi, Force sensitive beings were so hard to come by that when you came by one, you cloned him. The Emperor initially was going to be a clone of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's how rare clones were. That's how rare Force-sensitive beings were to come by. And in Rise of Skywalker, we sort of learn, I guess it's canon now, that you can't exactly clone a Force-sensitive being, because when Palpatine was thrown down the shaft by Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi, he was transferring his essence into a body, an exegol. But the Darth Plagueis book highlights something that the Acolyte does a few times, which is, just because the Jedi wield the Force and do it for good doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. I mean, obviously, yes, the Sith are evil, and one thing that I think The Last Jedi gets wrong is balance is powerful light, powerful dark, when in actuality, balance is complete eradication of darkness, with the Force, at least. Everything we're talking is in universe here. A universe that does not exist. Which I watched Inspector Gadget do the other night, and the old woman he arrests in the beginning is Jocasta Nu, gangster. She had a great few years. I don't imagine she's having them anymore. She has become one with the Force. To commune with him, teach you I will. Here's my the Plagueis book centers around the science of the Force. That a lot of fans hated when it first came out. They thought midichlorians made Jedi less superhero-like. Darth Tenebris was a scientist, a mad scientist. Plagueis, Jesus Christ, you crushed me with a bunch of rocks, Plagueis. And Darth Plagueis was one of them tall munes. He made a cameo in The Acolyte. He was the dude in the goon cave with the long fingers just creeping out. And he takes on... His real name is Higo Damnask, and he is of old money and runs. He's up there with Damnask Holdings and runs the banking clan. And when he is going through the galaxy, he notices a young Palpatine who maybe late teens, early 20s, notices darkness in him, can sense the Force in him, takes him on as a mentor. Kind of convinces Palpatine to kill his entire family, and then Palpatine does so, and Plagueis has the grand plan in mind, which is inevitably what we see play out in the original 6 movies, which is the Sith take control of the galaxy, eradicate the Jedi, and we shall have peace. Plagueis realizes that the government at this time isn't ready for an alien transfer because he's immune, not Olivia. That's how it's spelled when you look it up. So he realizes, and he also realizes that the Darth Bane started the rule of 2. Always 2, there are a master and an apprentice. And Plagueis knows that the Sith always betray one another, and if the grand plan were to succeed, he needed someone who he could trust and someone who was going to get as much out of it as he was. So he recruits Palpatine to do so, and devises the plan to get Palpatine to become Chancellor. The Darth Plagueis book is basically episode 0. It tells you how we get the Trade Federation involved, how they schemed everything so Palpatine would be able to overthrow Valorum, and Plagueis dies along the events of the Phantom Menace. And a lot of people were upset because they said that he learned in the Darth Plagueis book, Plagueis and Palpatine are attempting to create life through the Force, and they don't see it appear right in front of them, so they figure, oh, we failed. And it's not until... Sorry, I live on Coruscant. That's what you're going to hear outside for a minute. It wasn't until Anakin showed up on Coruscant and Plagueis and Palpatine realized, oh, that's what we created. And that explains the Anakin not having a father. There was going to be a reveal scene because George loves his good old reels. There was going to be a reveal scene in Revenge of the Sith revealing Palpatine being Anakin's father, but that would have just been too on the nose. And if you want to believe it, you could believe it. It's still not really canon. But they were, at that point, this was a Legends book. It was sort of a confirmed but not confirmed thing. And if Plagueis learned how to create life through watching the Night Sisters, that does not tarnish Plagueis or Anakin Skywalker. If you pay attention to who Darth Plagueis was, you'll understand that everything he knew he learned because he was a Sith Lord who understood, more important than the power of the Force, the power of knowledge, and he studied and killed. Dragon will scrape and lick. That was Plagueis, right? Like he was that's what he got from his master. His master was Darth Tenebris was a man who loved knowledge, Jackie Aprile. And if he either knows the stranger in the Acolyte and has been training him, or he's just been slowly watching him this entire time because he's been tracking this Vergence in the Force, which isn't a Vergence, I guess, because Osha and May were the same person. I hope it gets a season 2. I hope that season 2 goes very much into Palpatine and Plagueis. The storytelling. The only thing I would change is you make episode 7, the one where it finally tells you what the Jedi did to Osha and May, specifically Soul. That should have been episode 1. It could have been episode 1 for me. I don't like the cut back to 3 weeks earlier storytelling thing. And I think more people would have been on board and not hated this show so much if they had done that. But that's an artistic standpoint, or that's an artistic choice. If you're going to bitch about that, then you can't jerk off George Lucas for having a whole scene where there's a diner and we see Dexter's ass crack. I would love to see season 2 of The Acolyte. It shows you that, yes, the Jedi are wrong. And there's a great line in the episode with the Night Sisters when they say to the Jedi, you would rather her be raised by an institution, because that's what the Jedi are. They are an institution who never really get it right. And it's because of that they have had so many PR nightmares over the years. Their first rule is they're not allowed to love. Anakin had these deep feelings and emotions that he was told to suppress and not romantically chase. That's why Anakin was able to, or that's why Luke was able to stop the Sith, because Luke was not raised by an institution. Though he had tragedy, Luke was always and was surrounded by his friends. That's what Luke's that's what Luke's Jedi Order was. He left his own Jedi training despite the many warnings of both of his mentors to not go and save Han and Leia, and Yoda's reasoning wasn't getting through to him. You want me to sacrifice Han and Leia? Yeah, if you honor what they fight for. And then Obi-Wan getting pissy again. If you choose to face Vader, you will do it alone. I cannot interfere. Oh, but you can watch me jack off every day, Ben? Thanks. The reason why Luke's compassion is boundless, and maybe that was my biggest problem with him in the Last Jedi. And I wasn't ready to see him die yet, but he would have gone out that way. And it's sort of the whole point of his character is he will be the one who doesn't give up, who sees the best in you, and will always give you the second chance. And for the most part, the reason why the Jedi are flawed is because they run an institution and then they adhere to a very specific code of ethics. I think Mace Windu sort of physically embodies all the Jedi's fuck-ups. Take a look at the arrest of Chancellor Palpatine, right? Like, when Anakin goes to tell Mace Windu Palpatine's a Sith Lord, Mace is walking into a gunship with 3 other Jedi, going to pick up some space groceries, right? What does Mace do when he finds out Palpatine might be a Sith Lord? Does he call Yoda? No, he just gets in a ship with those Jedi who weren't even planning on doing that. So who knows if they're even trained well enough to do this thing? And that's why they all got murked in 0.0002 seconds. He didn't handle, he was arrogant because everything that Mace thought, he thought it was the correct answer. He also, right before Anakin found out Palpatine was a Sith Lord, told Anakin to go tell Palpatine that Grievous has been engaged with on Utapau with Obi-Wan, and he sends him out of the room. And as soon as Anakin leaves the room, Mace goes, I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. The dark side of the Force surrounds the Chancellor. Motherfucker, go have a talk with him then. But he just didn't have that frame of thinking, and they immediately go to, if he is a Sith Lord, the Jedi are going to have to take control of the Senate in order to ensure a peaceful transition. Why? Why them? Separation of church and state. Maybe the fact that he's a Sith Lord and he needs to be removed from office should make everybody go, hey, let's keep a closer eye on these dark side beings. Although the only one who I think I knew Palpatine was a Sith was Tarkin and Thrawn, just like they were the only ones that knew Anakin was Vader, and Ahsoka. Soul and the one who had the racist whip lightsaber, they're 2 more flawed Jedi. The sad thing is Soul is one of the most tragic characters in Star Wars for me, but now one of my favorite Jedi. Definitely one of the greatest swordsmen, and the action scenes in that movie, in that show, were incredible. That Wookiee Jedi, I think his name is Tanaka. That was some scary shit. I go, oh man, Wookiees will really pull arms out of your sockets if you lose. his biggie big wookie, can't you see? Somehow my sisters hypnotize me, and I'm a fuck up Tommen from Game of Thrones cause he is a bitch. Soul was one of the greatest swordsmen, very Qui-Gon-esque, definitely fucked up, but why did he fuck up? Because of his training. And where did he get his training from? The Jedi. He defended himself against what he thought was an attack from the Night Mother, and instead she was going to let Osha go because Soul couldn't tell the difference between Soul and Osha, because I guess he couldn't sense her connection in the Force, or maybe he could sense her, but she was upstairs in her room, so it just felt like she was there. I don't know how the Force works.
That's not how the Force works.
But I thought the Acolyte was a great... I don't really care too much about the High Republic era. The most I know about it is from Jedi Survivor, Fallen Order 2, I think that's what it's called, with Dagan Gera. I don't really care. I'm not really too invested. Maybe I should read some of the books. If anyone has any recommendations, I would love to check them out. But this was an interesting look into it because you have to realize that Jedi themselves are a problem because they are a body and they're not a soul. They're the greatest... They're probably the pure hardest Force wielders there are, but because of their own bureaucracy and stick up their ass rules, dark side of the Force didn't cloud their vision in the prequels. They are peace. They did. We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And in the movie, we're soldiers now. I would love to see a season 2 of The Acolyte. Would love to see a season 2 of Ahsoka. Loved the Yoda cameo at the end of Acolyte. We knew we were going to get that. I said we're either going to get Plagueis or we're going to get a Yoda, and we got both. So you know what? I can't complain. It's like when Book of Boba Fett came out. Were there things about that show I didn't like? Sure. Spy Kids Speeder Chase. But then Boba Fett rode a fucking Rancor. What more can I ask for? You know what I had when I was a Star Wars kid? I had cards. Training cards and a new Lego Millennium Falcon every year. That's what I get. So I will quietly shut the fuck up and watch whatever they jingle keys in front of me because I love this franchise. I love this story. It's kids get to watch it now. Kids know kids always have been able to watch it, but it will continue to be that way for generations to come because we know the mouse loves the almighty dollar. We have social media. And I asked you guys, we have social media. I asked you some questions on the Instagram. You can follow on Instagram, Certain POV Podcast. I asked, what do you want me to talk about on the pod when we record today? And we're recording today, so let me see what some of your questions were. Okay, let's see. Oh, I screenshotted them. Clear your mind of questions. Okay. Before the whole Palpatine being unalive shenanigans, did you have any theories regarding Rey's origin? Yes, I did. I thought that at the end of The Force Awakens, when Luke is at the top of that mountain, I thought, and this is my fault, and I think this is why a lot of people hated The Last Jedi, because nerds write movies in their head, and when the movie they see is in the movie we wrote in our head, we immediately hate it. Plus, we all think we're directors. When I thought Luke was... at the end of The Force Awakens, I thought Luke was standing over Mara Jade's grave. Mara Jade was Luke Skywalker's wife in Legends. She was the Emperor's hand, his assassin, who, after her ability to use the Force, was deeply connected to Palpatine's. And when the Empire fell, she converts to the light side of the Force, and Luke gets married and has kids with her. Because in that version, Luke learns the mistakes of the Jedi and why I didn't agree with him making Grogu choose between someone he loves and training as a Jedi, because ask R2 what happened the last time someone had to make that choice. R2 was there and he watched Obi-Wan give you a murder weapon that had the serial numbers rubbed off the Glock. I thought that Luke was standing over Mara Jade's grave, and the reason why he was so speechless when he saw Rey was because Rey was his daughter that he had with Mara Jade, making Kylo Ren his cousin. Kylo Ren wiped Rey's memory because he couldn't bring himself to take down Luke's Jedi temple, or couldn't kill Rey because it was her cousin. So he wiped her memory and dumped her on Jakku, and that's why she was strong with the Force. That's why she had a connection to the lightsaber. That's what I thought. That's what I thought Rey's parentage was going to be. Then I thought, well, if that's not the case, then she is a Kenobi. How would that happen, Troy? In the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan had a love interest, Duchess Satine, and he could have had a couple of flings with her. Hello there, come here, my little friend. So uncivilized. Because Obi-Wan literally says the words, had you given the word, I would have left the order for you. And then Darth Maul kills her. And then Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul. So, eye for an eye, or a torso for a love of your life, a soulmate. But then they made her a Palpatine because I think they ran out of ideas. I think that was their only way to bring him back, because they didn't have any villains by episode 9. They could have really ended the franchise with 8. I don't mind Rey being a Palpatine. It's kind of just whatever for me. I don't mind her taking up the name Skywalker. It's just kind of whatever for me. I haven't seen those movies too many times. Maybe I should give them a rewatch. But that was my theory for Luke at the end of Force Awakens. I also thought Ezra was Snoke. And now we know Palpatine was Snoke. How do you feel about no Mara Jade live action representation yet? I think we should get some. I would love for them to let me write a Mara Jade show, because I have a great idea for it, and I think that we will get it. I think they just don't know where to put her and when. It's like Starkiller. They can't really put him anywhere because he's too powerful of a Sith user, and they can't nerf him too much to be an Inquisitor. And every time there's somebody with a helmet in a Star Wars trailer, they go, it's Starkiller, not realizing that, oh yeah, they could have made a new character. I would love to see Mara Jade. There's a Mara Jade comic series called The Emperor's Hand, I believe. If you have the Marvel Unlimited app, it's 6 issues, and I highly recommend it. It's very, very, very good. If you had to choose, which one are you eating? Roast pork, Yoda stew, or Naboo fruit? Well, the answer is pretty obvious there, man. It's the Naboo fruit. When I was a kid, I used to call pears the Star Wars fruit, because when Anakin's picking it up and he cuts it for Padme, risen her up, going, if Master Obi-Wan saw me doing this, he'd be very grumpy. Yeah, imagine if he saw what you did in that Tusken camp. Yoda made his stew out of root leaf. I cook. And the roast pork, that was a funny scene in Last Jedi when Chewbacca couldn't eat it out of guilt. But let's be honest, Chewie would have eaten it in front of the whole family. Been like, if you don't fly out of here in 2 seconds, you're going to be seconds, bitch. How to hide how much of a nerd I am when I'm trying to get girls. Well, my friend, 2 things. 1, never hide how much of a nerd you are, because you want her to fall in love for who you are, and who you are is a nerd. And if it's meant to be, she will fall for you. And second, you don't realize how many women are also nerds and find nerdism to be pretty hot. And you know why? Because we get very passionate about things. And men, you could be a woman, but I'm going to assume you're a dude. Men are known for bottling things up and not getting emotional about stuff. I get very emotional about Star Wars. And I'm not saying talk her ear off every 5 seconds about the Force and make her show. I never really try to show people Star Wars, because it's not going to have the effect on them that it does on me. But in my experience, old pirate, they love to hear when you get all giddy about things, because they go, wow, he really has a good interpretation of romance and story structure, you old pirate. Just don't talk about it so much. Shower, and when it comes up, make it come up at her discretion. That would be my advice. What to do when fans are harassing you for liking The Acolyte? Same thing I do. Don't pay attention to them. I'm sorry you have to put that energy into hating a thing that quite literally does not exist. It's like when people got pissed that the bombs in The Last Jedi went down because there's no space and gravity. And they said that they wanted to remove The Last Jedi from Star Wars canon. Canon meaning timeline of events that happened. Guess what? None of this happened. You don't like it? Turn it off. Go talk to someone who also doesn't like it. Boom. You two can go be miserable together. I'm going to sit here and watch it because I'm a pretty lonely guy. Do I have a preference in lore, or is it interchangeable for me as long as it's good? That's a great question. I sort of go through phases. I have my prequel phases, which I'm sort of in right now because I'm reading the book Star Wars Archives 99 to 2005, and it details the making of the films. And it's a sequel to the Star Wars Archives 7783, which details the makings of those films. am now getting into more Legends material because I wasn't really too familiar with it, and I've read almost everything in canon. I love the comics, the Darth Vader run of comics that have been coming out since 2015. I think they've done a few different series, but they're great. Sometimes the comics are a little too much, so I try to stick to the Darth Vader one because that's one clear line I like. I love I love Thrawn. I love what they've done with him. That was what I grew up on. That was my episode 7 until Force Awakens came out. I love the Thrawn ascendancy. I love the Ahsoka show. My favorite aspects of Star Wars lore have to center around the Force, I would say, because I dabble in Buddhism, and the Force is obviously based on Buddhism. The Jedi are based off of samurai, and the everything is connected, and we are the universe, and the universe is us, and energy can't be created or destroyed. And when you lose someone, rejoice for them for joining the greater part of the universe, and they're always going to be with you as so long as you remember them. I love the family aspect. I love the Death Star trench run scene where Han saves Luke. Makes me cry every time because it makes me think of all of my friends. I love the lessons of forgiveness. Padme's last words were, "There's still good in him," said the woman who just got choked by him and knows that he let's just say stopped a bunch of younglings from ever having an 8th birthday. To narrow it down, I love the familial, as George was saying, it's about family. I love the family, I love the Force, and I love fucking. Though there's not a lot of that going on in those movies. A lot of kissing between siblings. Which Jedi do you think you would OD? Do you think would OD on fentanyl? Which Jedi would OD on fentanyl? You know, I would have to say Mundi. Mundi seems like a fentanyl dude because Mundi's the only Jedi that's allowed to fuck because his species are endangered. So I could see him getting crazy and just being like, "No, man, I could take. What about the fentanyl attack on my nostrils?" But it would definitely be Woody. What are my thoughts on Disney's introduction of Legends into material into canon? Great. You know, we're not going to get it otherwise. Throw into the Legends, and as long as Dave Filoni is at the helm and understands where it fits into a universe, rather than what we were talking about earlier in the episodes where you have the suits making creative decisions, Filoni is the chosen one. We need more of that, and I love that. And we need to credit those who created that material in Legends. And you also have to understand, George Lucas didn't consider Legends to be canon. You know, like he was like, if it's not the movies, I don't really know too much about it. And Filoni is a huge nerd. He worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender and left that to go work on the Clone Wars because George Lucas called him. So I hope we get to see more lore material, more Legends material adapted into Disney canon, such as Mara Jade. Will I post Padawan Anakin? You know what? I have my braid. I have this Padawan braid because I'm going to do an Anakin sketch. Let me see if I can get this in here. Let me see if I could. I was watching an interview with Hayden, with Natalie Portman, and she said she kept one of Anakin's Padawan braids from Attack of the Clones, and Hayden Christensen goes, "I don't know whose hair you have because they used to sew that into my head every day." So I'd be like, "I wonder whose hair I'm wearing today." Here you go. Here's the Padawan braid. I don't like sand. Master Obi-Wan if my father saw me doing this, he'd be very grumpy. Oh, wait, let me get it over there we go. Oh, no, it fell off. Okay, there we go. How's that? Does that work? I don't like sand. It's coarse. Not just the men, but the women and the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughter them like animals. I hate... Padme, why are you horny right now? But there you go. That's just for you. And I'll keep that in the rest of the pod. Just for you. Let me see if I can. There we go. Yeah. All right. What other questions do I have for you, my friends? Any Star Wars moments that ever make me cry? I can give you 3 Star Wars moments that make me cry. 3 is when Han is about to get frozen and Chewbacca starts fucking up stormtroopers. And Vader's like, the scene is Boba Fett going, what if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me. And Vader goes, the Empire will compensate you if he dies. Put him in. And then he just starts making meat work out of the stormtroopers. And then Han has to stop him. Chewie, hey, Chewie, this won't help me. Listen to me. There'll be another time. The princess, you gotta take care of her. You hear me? I love that moment because, again, moments of friendship, and he was willing to do that because he was not ready to say goodbye to his homie. Second moment that makes me cry, and I've talked about this on Bonding before, is when Anakin leaves his mother on Tatooine, because it reminds me of me and my mom when we left to go do, or I left to go do stand-up. My mom is a nurse, one of the real heroes. And a scene that will bring tears to my eyes without fail every single time. Vader, you were right about me. Tell your sister you were right. Because that's what Luke is all about. No matter what they've done, it costs way more to hold on than it does to let go. And also, those were Padme's last words. And I think when he's looking at the end of Return of the Jedi, before they added in a no, it was so much more powerful when he's just looking back and forth. And I always interpreted that as being he's looking at the last part of Padme he has left. And that's why he says, you were right about me, because we know what her last words were. I don't know if he ever does. Maybe there's a lot of times in this podcast I'm going to say things that I'm not sure if are true or not, but if I said them, what I told you was true from a certain point of view. So until next week, goodbye, old friend. And remember, the Force will be with you always.